Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world at the moment. Welcome to the premiere session of the African Tea. I'm Deanna. This is my girl, T. Michelle, and let's get started. We want to start with basically a short little intro of who we are and why we wanted to come together to do the African Tea, and then we're going to dive right on into that pot of tea of, is this really Africa really the motherland? So as I said, I'm Deanna. I'm a Black American from California. I come from a long line of great people from the once great state of California. I consider myself to be a travel lover. And I know this is going to be a little bit picky, but a reformed Pan-Africanist. I've been traveling since I was in my mid-20s with the focus on the smaller islands of the Caribbean and the continent of Africa. I've actually traveled to every region of the continent, with the regions being the North, the South, the East, the West, and the often overlooked Central Africa. I would say that I currently reside in Johannesburg, South Africa. I've been here for about 8 years. And no, I didn't move here because I was on a quest for the motherland, nor did I move here because I was trying to escape racism. I moved here because I was tired of the rat race in California, being on the road for 3-4 hours commuting and all that. And I just knew that my life had a better plan than to be dealing with that. I want to go into basically why I wanted to start the African Tea. And basically it boils down to, I was just like tired and really hurt from the constant stories I would hear from diasporans, particularly women, about how they were either taken advantage of or disappointed by people on the continent, or if I'm real, these pseudo-Pan-Africanists in the conscious community right in the USA. And so I thought to myself, ice cubes, how to survive in South Central, and thought, why not come up with a space where we can discuss all things pertaining to Africa, essentially how to survive, how to explore, how to live on the African continent, but in a balanced way, where we can explore topics that are good, the bad, and everything in between. Not just the Wakanda is forever or welcome to the motherland approach that you see that's, predominantly on social media today, nor the negatives that you've seen previously where, oh, don't go to Africa, it's this, it's that. So that's my reason why. T. Michelle, let the people know a little something about yourself and why you want to be part of the African Tea.
Hey, everybody. I am T. Michelle, also known as the Travel Sister. I'm a Black American, born and raised in Detroit with Louisiana roots, going back 8 generations at least. My personality is definitely a perfect mixture of the two. I'm also a travel lover like Deanna. I prefer to go to countries with Black people full of the African diaspora. I first traveled to Africa in 2013 with visits to South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Ghana. I fell in love and just knew I had to get back. And I made it back in 2015. I took a trip back to South Africa, was there for about 3 months, hit a couple other countries on the continent, and decided then that I was going to split my time between the US and Africa. And so that's what I did. I split my time between the US and Johannesburg, South Africa. I was there up until about 2020 when COVID hit. Since that time, I have since moved to Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire in West Africa, which is a Francophone company. So I'm there enjoying life, improving my French, and just getting it in. Like Deanna, I wanted to start this space because me and her are always talking offline about these crazy stories that we see online about people from the diaspora, a bunch of half truths, misinformation, and just outright lies. And so we decided that we needed to channel this negative energy into something positive. That me and her both had some really good information that we need to share. And both of us are probably not, this is not our thing. Like, we aren't people who are typically wanting to be in the public eye, but we thought that it would be good for us to share our viewpoints. And so we're here. Um, Another reason is that the YouTube space for the diaspora is full of men, few women, and even fewer who are having really serious discussions and giving a balanced view of life in Africa. We wanted to go beyond the romanticism, address some of the common and real issues, and just generally challenge certain myths that people have about Africa. This channel is by, for, and about the diaspora, which we define as people who uh, are of African descent. They are in the Americas and beyond with no recent connection to Africa. Generally, some refer to these people as DOS. Some are, some aren't. But generally, they are people who have not had a recent family connection to the continent of Africa. Everyone is welcome to listen and enjoy what we have to say, but our focus is on the diaspora. Now, with that being said, Deanna, tell us what you're sipping on, and let's get into this tea. With Africa really the motherland?
Well, in honor of my husband, who's Cameroonian, I decided to brew a kettle full of foulery. And foulery is basically what those in Egypt might call kirkidi, what those in Nigeria might call zobo, what those in the Caribbean might call siro. And how about you? What are you sipping on today?
I'm sipping on some masala tea from Tanzania.
All right. So today's topic is Africa really the motherland? Well, for me, I'm going to say, in the larger scheme of the world, if we're talking about Africa being the birthplace of humanity, I will say yes, by all means, is the motherland. But if we talk about it in regards to what, I don't want to say is pushed, but what Black Americans or those in the Americas have been socialized to be as our motherland, our center, etc., then I say no. No, 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 no. And the reason, I have three reasons for that. One, we know for a fact that those who, descend of slavery were not taken from the entire continent of Africa. The continent is massive. So why would we look to say, oh, the entire continent is our motherland? For that respect, it doesn't make sense for me. I mean, the second thing is, I feel like it's something that only pertains to those of us in the Americas. You have white Americans who have actually, most of them have been in the US for a shorter period of time than us, and they're not hyphenated. They're not told to, oh, look into your motherland, which is Europe. They don't. They're just American. The same holds true for people of, say, Indian descent that you might find like in the Caribbean or whatnot. They're not to look to their motherland of Asia. It's a specific, it's India, because it's a massive country. So for me, I just cannot get with that, the whole notion that we must be the only ones who must come from an entire continent. No. And then lastly, and this one I know you might not like, so let me just sip a little tea. In my experience of traveling and being acquainted with on the continent, I would say 90% plus of the people on the continent don't see Africa as our motherland. They are not, being like, oh, my sister, my cousin, welcome home. It's just not the case. So for me, I accept that. I am American, and I'm okay with that. My people have been here for I don't know how long, but we know it's been a long, 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 long time. What say you, Tia Michelle? What say you?
So I say yes, Africa is definitely a motherland. For me, I see Africa as an ancestral motherland. Obviously, my ancestors were from the continent of Africa. I accept that, I respect it. And for me, I feel a spiritual connection to that landmass that's called Africa. But at the same time, I also have a spiritual connection to the United States of America, good, bad, or ugly. My family goes back there at least 8 generations. We've been there for centuries. America made me who I am. My culture is there, my family is there. And so that's not something that I'm willing to reject. So for me, Africa is an ancestral motherland. But the U.S. is also a motherland for me as well. And, and talking with Africans on the continent, it's interesting because a lot of Black Americans often say, oh, Africans think this way or Africans think that way. And I mean, one thing that we have to recognize is that Africans are no different than anyone else. People have diverse views and thoughts just like everyone else. And there is no one way that Africans think. I've talked to Africans about, this very topic, and I've probably I would say there are 3 schools of thought. The first one is that, no, you guys are not African and Africa is not your motherland, that it's been too far removed. You're hundreds of centuries removed from Africa. You don't have any family here anymore. You're not practicing any, traditional African cultures. You don't speak any languages. And those are the things that make one African. You all aren't that. And so you need to accept the fact that you are now in, whether it's the US, whether it's Jamaica or wherever else in the diaspora you may be, that's who you are. So, I mean, that's one school of thought. There's another school of thought where I've been told that, yes, you all are African, that your ancestors were African and they didn't stop being African because they were dragged to the shores of the Americas. That if I go and move to Europe tomorrow, if I have kids in Europe, my kids are going to be African. If they have kids, their kids are going to be African. And it's the same for you. So I would say that's the second school of thought. The third would probably be somewhere between the two, that yes, Africa is a motherland for people from the diaspora. Obviously our ancestors were from the continent, but we also are from the lands of where we currently reside and where our families have currently been residing for the last hundreds of years. And that's probably where I fall.
Mm-hmm. So, looking at the two of us, it's safe to say we got some other stuff going on in the gene pool, right? Looking at you, I'd say you probably got a little more European ancestry than even me.
Well, I mean, of course, it is what it is. Everybody knows the history of the slave trade, and so that's true for most of us.
Okay, so what I'm getting to is, when you travel Europe, do you have that ancestral feeling? Are you feeling some tie? Because I mean, those will be your ancestors too. If it's about a place that your people came from originally, right? Do you have that feeling when you're in Europe?
I do not have that feeling in Europe at all. Not by any stretch of the imagination. And so, for me, it is something that really is not explainable. It is it's just the feeling that you have. It is a sense of serenity, peace, familiarity, even though we haven't been there in centuries. There is something in the spirit that says this is where your people originated. This is where you were from. I mean, so I don't have that in Europe at all.
I mean, to some extent, I with you. Like for me, everywhere that I've traveled on the continent, because I've been drawn to go there. There's something there, right? For me, I am probably the most comfortable in the Sahara Desert. I just love there, right? But I also have always been drawn to visit the Carolinas. And to my understanding, I had no tie there. It was only until recently that I found out that I had people from the Carolinas, like long time ago. So for me, I do believe you have some draw to where you come from. But to me, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be in Africa because we've been so, far removed from that. And then the second thing I say with that is, in the conscious community, they'll call someone like, a master teacher. And there was a master teacher by the name of Runoko Rashidi. May he rest in power. His work was always on the Black presence everywhere else, the Black presence in China, the Black presence in India, all these different places, right? And you can see that. To me, when you look in the Pacific, you look at Samoa, you see that these people definitely point, because they're, richly melanated, as people like to say. But they're still not told that Africa is their motherland. That's something that is specifically reserved for us. And that to me is what has my brain always questioning. Why is that? At what point do you stop being told this is your mother, and when you don't have any recent, even I think historical ties? When you're talking about people who have been in the Americas, in the Caribbean, etc., people like to use that 400 years because of Ghana, but the slave trade started long before the Ghanaians, right, with the Dutch and the Portuguese. So you're talking about people who could have been in the Americas 500 years ago. Or if you're like me, I actually believe that there were people from with the present day Sahel, like in Mali, the Dogon, etc., who were traveling to the Americas, circumventing the globe. They were there even before then. So if you have people who are that far removed, how can you keep telling them, only those in the America, that your motherland is Africa, but the rest of them, no. For me, it's something that's done specifically to disconnect us to our ties to a global superpower. Because I feel like when you go to the Caribbean, right, people can be like, they're Jamaican, they're Dominican, they're Bayesian. And that's their base. That's who they are. They are told they have a culture. They're told they have an identity. But for us, we're still told we don't have culture. We don't have identity. And we must be African American on our quest to get to the motherland. And for me, I just can't accept it. I feel like there's more to it. We have been in the U.S., as it's known as Americas, longer than most. So if anyone has claims to say that America is our motherland, or part of our motherland, I should say that, if you need a motherland, it is us. And it's time for us to start claiming, that America is what it is because of us.
Well, I definitely agree with you there. I mean, as somebody who has family roots in Louisiana, like I said, going back at least 8 generations, we have a distinct culture there, a Creole culture. We have distinct Creole food that's known around the world. And so this idea that, we don't have any culture and that we have to look to Africa to find one is really absurd to me. That's my culture. I embrace it. I live it. I cook the food. I also enjoy plenty of African cuisine. I enjoy, some of the cultural traditions there as well. But I don't feel like I have to neglect anything that I have from the U.S. to embrace, a quote unquote African culture, because that's another thing too. What is African culture? There is no one African culture. You're talking about a continent that has, over 3,000 ethnic groups, well over 2,000 different languages. Some of the most diverse people in terms of look, language, traditions, thoughts, views that you have anywhere on the planet. And not to mention that these people generally were very nomadic. And so, they traverse the continent. So, in that respect, like I said, I do believe that it is a motherland for us. I think that before these fake artificial borders were enacted by Europeans, people freely went wherever they want to on that landmass, and they didn't have to worry about visas. They didn't have to worry about these land borders. And so it's a motherland. It absolutely is a motherland for everybody who is of African descent. But that does not mean that people have to reject their cultures, their lands where they have been in the current time.
It's interesting that you bring up the whole notion of the migratory nature of Africans, because I've heard this a lot, and I would say that's true to an extent, but the continent is massive, and the reality is that not all people on the continent were aware of other Africans because the continent is so massive. Like you definitely have, like I just use some areas that I know specifically about, right? So you have people like the Tikar people in Cameroon. You have, I believe it's the Hausas. You have the Olaf in Senegal, right? Their origin stories all state that they actually come from Sudan, southern Egypt type area, right? That's their origin story. But when you talk to them, do they tell you that they do anything tied to that region? Absolutely not. For them, they are from where they are presently from. Even the people that might stem from them, like the case of the Tikar, you have three different ethnic groups that derive from even the Tikar. This is the Bamoun, the Bamaleke, and the O people, right? So you have that. So even with that, when I look onto the continent, when you see the diversity, they don't go back hundreds and hundreds of years and say, "Oh, that's my land, this particular region." It's where they are, and that's why I think the longer I've lived here and started traveling and talking to people and what they consider to be culture, what they consider to be ethnic identity, is very different than this whole notion of the entire continent being a motherland. And then I also think to myself, if the people on the continent, right, uh, don't necessarily identify with being African or like the entire continent being their motherland, who are we as people who've been gone for so long to think that it's our motherland?
Well, I don't know. I would disagree with the notion that Africans don't view the continent as their motherland because I think that there are many who do. As for us, our history, our trajectory is so different. And I'm specifically speaking of us as Black Americans, as part of this wider diaspora in the Americas. For Black Americans, we know that our ancestors were bred during the slave trade. And so literally for most of us, if you look at our DNA test, like if you look at my DNA test, like I literally have origins from all over West and Central Africa, Western Bantu people, Eastern Bantu people, which we know both were very migratory. And so I mean, you look at this map for me, and it's literally all over, pretty much everywhere except for Northern Africa and Eastern Africa. Although I do have a small amount of Eastern Bantu as well. But, and so, this idea that I believe that is a result of migratory nature of people. That people moved around. None of those countries existed during the time of the transatlantic slave trade. And so when people say, "Oh, my background is from Nigeria, my background is from Ghana, my background is from Ivory Coast," or whatever, I mean, it's not true because none of those countries existed back then. What you have is that people who are presently in those particular countries, and they may or may not have been there hundreds of years ago. For a lot of them, they were migratory and they moved around, and I think that that's why you see so for us. Why you can look at our DNA origin map and you see so much across the continent. I think that just is just proof of how migratory the people actually were. And so for that reason as well, like I said, I say it's definitely an ancestral motherland because literally I'm all over the map, just about. So yeah, does that mean that people view me as a quote unquote African, same as them? Absolutely not. I definitely have never been called an African. Whether I'm an Anglophone Africa or, Lusophone Africa, Francophone Africa, I am the American. So,
The white one, have you got that one?
and
That you're white.
and I have been,
Absolutely.
I've been Mazungu or Bruni, Tobab. I mean,
Ringo.
so yeah. I mean, we have to be
Mhm.
honest about these things. It is what it is. No one realistically is saying that you guys are African. And if they are, you better look at that with some degree of caution.
And that's, I'm gonna say, for me, I say, you know, I do believe it's something that's personal in regards to Africa being your motherland. But I think it's safe to say that if you do, maybe keep that close to your heart. Because for me, the analogy that I've come up with in regards to this now is that it's kind of like the emperor's new clothes. You can go to Africa thinking that you gonna meet your cousins and everybody, and you going around and everybody's smiling at you because you in the motherland telling you cousin. But in reality, they laughing because they know that you're not. They know that you are not them. And it's kind of Emperor's New Clothes. He was tricked them believing that he had new clothes, but he really was naked. And he walking around, and everybody else know that but he the only one believing that he got on new clothes. And to me, that's how I feel. When you go to the to the continent, it is anywhere outside of a few Pan African communities which exist on the continent. They're there. People know that you're not coming back home. So, well, we're out of time for today, and what we want to do is, to please join us on the 25th, of September, which is a Monday, the same time, 1 p.m. As we discuss, we're going to move this, a little different direction and discuss something that might surprise you if you ever come and visit anywhere on the continent. And that's the issue of anti-Blackness on the continent. And we're going to discuss, do Africans like Africans, including you, the ones who believe you come from the motherland? So please stay tuned. See you Monday, 25th of September. We look forward to having you. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining us.